Good morning, lovelies. Hope everyone's doing well today. Welcome back to my kitchen, to Cooking Basics. The basic thing we're going to learn today is bread, a no-knead, overnight, crusty bread. It takes almost no hands-on time, but it takes a little bit of planning because once we mix everything together, we're going to let it rise at room temperature for 12 to 18 hours. I have actually let it go as long as 24 hours without any issues, and then we're going to bake it. After we heat up our pan for about 45 minutes in the oven, because the pan that's covered is going to create the steam and the burst of heat that we need to make this rise and to make this beautiful crust that we have. You have to have a Dutch oven, a cast iron Dutch oven, or the porcelain covered Dutch ovens are fine. Anything that can preheat in the oven at 450 degrees empty for about 45 minutes is going to be okay. I love this little cast iron one. It works great. Has a nice lid. It's very heavy. Tomorrow, this is going to go in the oven by itself for 45 minutes and get nice and hot and make a beautiful bread oven for us to bake this bread in. We are not going to grease this. That is important. Tomorrow, it does not stick. I promise you, this bread does not stick. So don't grease your pan. And when we mix our bread and our yeast and our flour and our salt together, I use this container because I like it, because it has measurements on the side and it has a nice fitting lid. You can use just a bowl and put plastic wrap over the top because you do have to have the top sealed. Again, with your bowl or whatever you're using for your dough, don't grease that. We want the dough to be able to walk up the sides of the wall of your bowl or your container, and it can't walk if it slips sliding back down. So give it some help and don't grease. This is what you're going to end up with. This bread is really very high water content and a very tiny bit of yeast. We're only going to use a half a teaspoon of yeast because it's going to ferment overnight and it's going to feed and grow and get a strong depth of flavor that you don't get with the lighter, gentler dinner rolls, which I also love, but they're just different. This has a more depth of flavor and it's a very hearty bread. So it's a small amount. We use 3 cups of flour, 1/2 teaspoon of yeast, 1 1/2 teaspoon of salt. We're going to whisk those together, and then we're going to add 1 1/2 cups of water, stir it up, and just let it sit overnight. No kneading required. We will get started on it in a little bit. Don't go away. Okay, so we have all of our ingredients together. We are going to pour in our 3 cups of all-purpose flour right into the bowl. We have 1 3/4 teaspoon of salt. We're putting in 1/2 teaspoon of yeast. I'm going to give it a quick stir. And then we are going to dump in 1 1/2 cups of tap water. You can mix this with your hands. I like to use the back of a wooden spoon because it doesn't stick so badly to it. It's very easy to clean. You're just going to stir it till it's incorporated. It's going to be wet and shaggy. You wouldn't want to roll this out at this point. Okay, I don't have any dry bits on the bottom. Oh, a little bit there. Get those in there. So that is it. This dough is going to sit for 12 to 18 hours. I'm going to put a top on it. You can use a regular bowl at home and just put plastic wrap, seal it over the top. This is going to sit just like this for 12 to 18 hours. We will come back in the morning. All right, we're going to do a little close-up here so I can help you see how to form this bread. It's the only part that takes a little bit of practice. We have our dough that has been resting for about 15 hours. It's right here. And then I have some flour. We're going to put a reasonably large amount of flour on the counter because this is a very wet dough. So it's going right here. I have a little plastic scraper here. I'm going to put it in the pan. Add a little flour there, and I'm just going to scrape around the edges and it's gonna plop right out onto my pile of flour. There we go. I'm gonna add a little flour on top because, again, very wet dough. We're gonna fold it just a couple of times to get some of that flour inside. Then we're gonna scoop most of it aside for just a minute. We're gonna take it, this is what it helps a lot to form the ball so it's not so floppy because it's such a loose dough. You put your hands here, and I'm gonna use my pinkies under the edge of the bread, and I'm gonna pull the bread back towards me, and then I'm gonna flip it and turn it around, and I'm gonna do it again, pinky under, and as I'm pulling, I'm mostly pushing underneath and letting it roll onto itself. You just want a little bit of flour. If you have too much flour here, it's just gonna slide. You want to catch on the counter or your board. I use my counter, just a little bit. And on top, it's forming a tight ball. And you only do that a few times, and then it's done. I'm gonna add a little more flour because it's gonna sit here for half an hour. My oven is already heating up. It has been heating up for about 20 minutes. I let it heat for a good 45 minutes to an hour because it needs to be that full 450 degrees to give that big burst of heat to get us the rise and the beautiful dark crust that we want. This needs to be, okay, it is sitting here on its nice little nest of flour. It needs to rest for 30 minutes. I'm going to just flip over a bowl and set it on top of it to give it a little bit of peace and quiet while it rests. No, to keep the air out of it, really. And then it's just gonna sit there. The oven's gonna continue heating. This is gonna rest for 30 minutes. We are going to carefully plop it into the hot pan that will have been heating up, and we will be good to go. Welcome back. Our bread dough has been sitting under its dome home for the last 30 minutes. We have had our cast iron pan in the oven with the lid on for the last 45 minutes, getting nice and hot so we can get that burst of steam and that burst of heat. We're gonna uncover this. I'm going to turn my back to you and grab the pan and put it right on my counter because my counter can handle that. Most counters can't. So, here's my glasses. All right, hang on a sec. We're gonna do this relatively quickly because we don't want to lose all that heat that we worked so hard to get. I'm gonna take the lid off, really hot, carefully scooped under this and plop it in, put the lid right back on. That's all there is to that. Now it goes back in the oven for 30 minutes with the lid on. I will remove the lid after 30 minutes and leave it for another 15. So, it's heavy. That is in the oven, successfully not burning myself. We really like that part. It's just gonna cook and get beautiful and golden and crispy. I love the hardness, the crispiness of the crust and the openness of the crumb inside. This is not a delicate light dinner roll, which I love those. This is a hearty bread with a lot of personality. We will check back in 30 minutes when we take the lid off. So my timer just went off. We're going to remove the lid from the bread and see how it looks. Carefully remove the lid. And this is what we have after our first 30 minutes of baking time. It looks like it's done, but it's truly not. There it is for you. Whew. A lot of moving there. It goes back in the oven for 30 minutes. Look what we have. Our timer went off. Final 15 minutes. Look at this, guys. I'm gonna dump it onto the rack. not touching the pan. Ooh, hot. Flip it back over and show you what we got. This is our beautiful loaf, fresh homemade bread. Can you hear that? That crispy crust is just yummy. It has to cool, unfortunately, for at least an hour before you eat it. If you cut into it, at least before 45 minutes, leave it an hour. It's going to be gummy because it is still drying out inside and still finishing. But this is what it looks like. Look how easy that was. Takes some time as far as resting it overnight, but it's definitely worth it. When it's cool, we're going to slice it and give it a taste. Our bread has been resting for an hour and it is ready to be cut and enjoyed. I have a serrated knife. You definitely need a good serrated knife for this. Mine's wet because I just washed it. Listen to this when I cut into it. I love this part. That crusty, crispy crust. I just love it. This is our bread. It is so good. Then I just stand it up because I don't want to smush it. And I slice it down this way. And there's a beautiful slice of bread. It's a tad bit warm still. I like my bread with olive oil and a sprinkle of salt. I like butter, but on bread I prefer olive oil and salt. I learned that in Italy once. That's so good. It's like you have to close your eyes when you eat it. So good. All right. The crust on this bread softens up after the first day. It's still fabulous. It is unbelievably good just toasted in the toaster. If you want to put a little olive oil in a pan and toast it in a pan and put some tomatoes that you've diced up with a little bit of olive oil or balsamic vinegar, sprinkle a little basil on top, you got a great bruschetta. For a friend of mine, I cut the recipe in half and make it in 2 small pans, and he uses them for bread bowls for soup. This is an amazing bread. You can add about 2/3 of a cup of craisins and the zest of an orange to the dry flour, yeast, salt mixture before you add the water. Stir that around and then add your water. It makes the best cranberry orange bread for holidays. In the flour, salt, yeast mixture before you add water, you can add a tablespoon of Italian seasoning. Makes beautiful bread. You can add some garlic powder. Make it yours. Again, your kitchen, your rules. Big basic bread for you to do whatever you want with. You guys have a great day. If you learned something, please give me a thumbs up. If you want to know more good basic tips so you can learn the basic skills of cooking so you can make the kitchen yours, subscribe. Thanks for stopping in. Y'all have a great day.